Hi, this is Emily Leiphart of Art from the Heart, and in this video I'm sharing a kid's birthday card using a Paper Smooches exclusive available only at Simon Says Stamp. This stamp set is perfect for celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, New Year's, and pretty much anything that involves a party. It not only comes with two adorable Paper Smooches critters, but fun balloons, confetti, banners, and sentiments. It really is a complete stamp set. You've probably seen the turtle used a few times, but I haven't seen anyone use the dog yet, so I'm putting him in the spotlight. I'll be using patterned papers from Crate Paper's Notes and Things 6x6 paper pad. I'm starting with an A2 card base. I've chosen a floral background to go directly against the card base. For the top panel, part of it will contain a shaker, so I need to strengthen it by adhering it to a piece of cardstock before trimming it down. I lay down a lot of adhesive on the mint herringbone pattern, attach to the cardstock and trim it down ½ an inch smaller than the base. I attach the floral piece to the card base and pull out an ombre cork pattern. I'm going to stamp the dog twice on two shades since I want his ears to be slightly darker than his body. I'm stamping his face a third time on white cardstock so I can cut out the eye that has a patch around it. Next, I found a mint butterfly with gold dots, and I want that pattern for the dog's party hat. Now I need to cut out all the pieces and piece them together. Since I'm tying the balloon strings to the dog's tail, I give him more support again by adhering the pattern paper to cardstock before trimming. I don't show all of my fussy cutting since it would be really boring to watch me cut out parts of this dog 5 times. After trimming out the big floppy ears, I adhere them to the dog with my zig glue pen. Then I trim out the hat and adhere that too. While trimming out the hat, I realized that a white eye patch wouldn't coordinate with the other papers, so I decided to re-stamp the eye on the cream of that same paper and use that instead. The little eye patch is so cute and gives the dog an extra dose of personality. Next, I'm going to use that cluster of dots as a pile of rubble for the dog to sit on. These dots could be used as bubbles, confetti, and maybe even an artsy looking cloud, but I'm going to use it as a pile of dirt or gravel. I'm going to stamp it so that the divot at the top is centered on the card. That's where I want the dog to sit. I stamp part of it a second time to extend it across the entire width of the panel as if it's one continuous stamp. Now I'm going to create the shaker part of the card using one of the big balloons dies. I want to overlap it with a smaller balloon or two from the original balloons dies. I try out a few different shapes before settling on a matching heart. I die cut the big heart through the panel and remove the positive piece. For the smaller heart, I choose a striped pattern in colors that will highlight the floral base. In this case, I forget to double up with cardstock, so I have to recut it and adhere the two pieces together afterwards. It has to have strength around the bottom where I tie the string. I made this card as I went along, so I didn't think about where the sentiment was going to go and if it would fit or not. Sometimes this is how I create with no rhyme or reason. It can get a bit frustrating, but it's also fun to just go with the flow. It really depends on my mood and whether I have a deadline looming. I think this particular sentiment is too big for the space and competes with the balloons. There's just too much going on up top. While I think about it, I'm going to work on the balloon strings. I use glossy accents to make sure that the knots are secure and that the string doesn't slip off the balloon or the card itself. Next, I'm going to prep the shaker by laying down score tape for the top layer of acetate. After the window is adhered, I use foam tape to build the frame for the shaker and support for the rest of the panel. I know I could have made it easy and built a square frame around the heart, but I wanted to use as few sequins as possible and keep them contained in a smaller area, so that's why I went to the trouble of using angled strips. I don't always do this, but that's what I decided to do at the time I made this card. I pour in a combination of 4 different colors and types of sequins. Peel the backing off the foam tape and adhere the second sheet of acetate. This way I don't have to worry about placing them on a card base and positioning the entire panel on the card around the sequins. Since they're contained, I can just flip over the panel and make sure it's straight on the card base without worrying about where the sequins are. There's no way to tie the string onto that shaker balloon, so I'm going to use glossy accents to attach the knot on top of the acetate. By tying a knot into the string, it looks exactly as if it was tied around the balloon. I mount the small balloon on foam tape and adhere it to the card. Next, I adhere the dog to the card, also with foam tape. I pull both strings taut and loop them around the dog's tail. Obviously, in real life, no one should ever tie anything to a dog's tail. This is just an element of design on a card. I put a dab of glossy accents underneath the loop to hold it in place and trim off the ends at 2 different lengths. Then I add another dab of glossy accents to hold the ends in place in the direction I want them to lie. I place an acrylic block over top to hold it down while it dries. Now I go back to decision making on the sentiment. This smaller Celebrate is from the Hullabaloo stamp set. I decide that it has to lie in the acetate of that big balloon. Unfortunately, I didn't think of it before creating the shaker, so now I know I probably won't stamp perfectly. I'll just have to make do. I go over the acetate with my embossing bag so that stray specks won't get stuck everywhere. I'll be using black embossing powder, so this step is more important than ever. I've never heat embossed on acetate before, so I'm only giving it quick bursts of heat. It warped a bit while I was heating it, but once the powder melted and everything dried, it was perfectly flat. I went back in with a zig emboss writer to fill in the middle where it didn't stamp well. It's still not perfect, but it's as good as it'll ever be considering the fact that this step should have been done closer to the start of the card as opposed to the end. Finally, I take a dry tissue and wipe away any powder that was lying on top of the acetate. Now my card is done. Friends of ours just got a mini golden doodle for Christmas, and the puppy looks like the dog in this stamp set. Isn't he just the cutest? I think this stamp set would also work well for a new pet card. Please refer to the supply links below if you're interested in any of the products I used in this video. You can also visit my blog for stills and more information about my work. Thanks so much for watching.